Farm4Profit podcast. Take a listen, have a blast. Farm4Profit podcast. Learn about farming while having a laugh. Farm4Profit podcast.
When I worked at the fire department, there's a thing called span of control. And basically it's how much can an effective manager manage effectively? And so can one chief manage 46 guys fighting a fire? No. Oh. So that's why we have captains and lieutenants and commanders and, shift people, is because your span of control that the military's figured out is like the max of 7, 3 to 7, 5. And once you get 5 things going in your head and you're trying to manage 5 things effectively, you got that. But past that, most people can't do it.
Yeah.
So
that's what my problem is.
that's what it is. So you got to delegate.
I can't. Just 10 things going at all times.
Exactly.
See, you need to do 5 or 6 things at all times. Just let the others drop.
Right.
Completely gone. This could be the best opening to an episode we've ever had. I don't know where I want to start and where I want to stop. Wow, we've got it all.
Yeah.
Dave's span of control might be the way to kick off the episode for today because...
Oh, man, I already had a bleep in there then.
We are going to get to that E rating on podcast.
Yeah.
PG-13.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Excellent, yeah.
That's right. Oh, yeah. Good call. You're smooth. This is a great kickoff. Well, listeners, welcome back to the Farm4Profit podcast. Tanner, Corey, Dave, sitting here in a packed studio.
It is.
The sun's shining. We got the fan blowing.
Yeah, what'd you do? This was the day you turned the AC up?
Oh.
I saw it was like 71. You had it at 69.
I think I did that last night. We were here a little bit late last night. It's nice having a studio that you can kind of hang out in all hours. And we stayed a little bit later last night.
Your wife watches the cameras.
Yeah, we need like to disable those.
Not like, I don't think they're charged right now. Maybe we shouldn't say that out loud. But we're excited to have a couple of guests in studio with us. It's always fun to put this nice table together and share our space with a couple of fellow podcasters, if I'm not wrong.
Yep.
Both are featured on your own podcast. But we have Nicolas and Kent here, and we're going to let them do a little bit of an introduction to you guys. So, Nicolas, why don't you start first?
All right.
First, do you go by Nick, or is it Nicolas only?
I typically go by Nicolas. So my mom used to spank me if I'd introduce myself as Nick. So when you say Nick, I feel it.
I am going to be saying Nick over and over and over.
He's just going to be twitching
Normally, it's the other way around. Like, if they say your full name, you're in trouble.
She loved the long names. So it was yes, ma'am, yes, sir, and Nicolas.
Yeah,
that's what.
Very good.
But, my name's Nicolas. I'm in this world because, my mom married my stepdad, who's a prairie farmer, when I was 7. And I don't know, maybe around the time I turned 8, they handed me a hoe and said, good luck, I started hoeing weeds and grew up on the prairie farm and went to college, got an education in Bible and counseling in Northern California, one of the most beautiful places I've ever been, mountains. It's not when people say California, It's not that. It's awesome. And came back. My dad's getting to the age where I think he was 64 at the time. No plan for retirement. Super good at working and growing prairie. Not a future planner for those kinds of things. And I just told him, said, hey, I want to help you out. I like the farm. I want to help keep it going. And kind of helped him. We're still transitioning. We'll probably be transitioning till he passes away in 20 years.
Yeah.
But then along the way, I'll let him tell the full story, but I got an email from a random gentleman who saw my truck begging for a job.
Was that idiot?
Yeah. Well, he begged for an interview, and then after he did the interview, proceeded to text me every week or two.
I was desperate.
Wow. Good follow-up is good follow-up.
That's right. Thank you. And I think begging's a loose term, right? Just asking.
I was hungry. I had a few kids at home. What would you guys do?
Here's the thing. It worked. He's here.
That's right.
And so naysay all you naysayers.
That's right.
Hey, shoot your shot. But I would say typically the ones that beg for it, it's not usually the best. I'm just going to say that right now.
Well, it, for better or for worse, I'd say it bettered my life 51%, made it worse 49%. So we're net positive.
Yeah, I'll take it.
Yeah. The house wins.
That's right. Yeah, so my name's Kent Boucher. I grew up in Iowa and Illinois. I was born in Des Moines, and then my dad was in education, and he got his first principal job. So he started out as a teacher when I was a little kid, and got his first job as a school principal in northern Illinois. So we uprooted from all of our grandparents and everything. Looking back now, you can imagine like how traumatizing that had to be for all of them. Well, there goes all of our grandkids and our kids. They were so close, and now they're 4 hours away or whatever. And so then I grew up more or less in Illinois, mostly in the Quad City area, and then went to college and got a degree in science education. And I taught high school biology for 7 years. And my grandparents, they were still living on the farm that my grandpa farmed until I was, well, you guys can probably relate to this, until a lot of that, it was like that last generation of the old school small farmers were getting out. His last harvest was in 99, fall of 99. And so I was only like 10 years old, was around the farm enough to where some of my formative years were, farming was really important to me. But then it was like, well, now it's out of my life. They still lived on the farm, but cash rented it to a couple different neighbors. And so I cared about farming, but by the time like you start getting old enough to know anything that matters about farming, it was already gone. So it's like, well, that's not an option anymore. And so I went into education, and for those first 7 years, it was okay. Teaching is just so many hours, right? If you're gonna do a good job, it's so many hours. And I started having, my wife and I, we started having kids, and now it just adds to that complication of spending all this time grading, making lesson plans and everything. And during that time, my grandparents were they were in their mid 80s, and just keeping up on the old 4-square farmhouse was too much, and on the outbuildings and everything. And they're like, "Hey, you guys want to buy the house from us?" And it's like, sure, it's a great deal. And so we moved back, but that meant that I had to switch up careers, and I was in a pretty good spot teaching. I was teaching AP Bio, Honors Bio, Human Anatomy and Physiology, so I had all the kids that wanted to be there and wanted to do well.
All sound terrible.
Yeah. But it was a pretty, as far as teaching goes, it was a pretty good job. And I had to go from that to what I could find, which was a middle school science job. And it was terrible. Every day it was like one of those things where you have to like find it, and you just to drag yourself out of bed and show up. And so
for context, he started that job in August, and he had emailed us begging for a job by end of October, I believe.
Yeah,
So
I
it
did.
wasn't very long.
Yeah, I made it to October, and
Didn't even get through harvest.
that's right. I showed up, and Nick's like, "Yeah, come in for an interview," and that went well. And then I think by March, I met with Carol. They were like, "You know what? You should probably finish the school year," which I agreed. I didn't want to hear that. I wanted to be like, "No, we really need you now." And be like, "Well, I'm sorry, guys. I gotta go. This new place really needs me." But he's like, "You're gonna burn bridges in the community and stuff if you leave the school hanging in the middle of the year." And so I stuck it out. And by what was it? I went on a bear hunt in Montana in early June that year, and I got home on like Thursday or Friday afternoon, and I started working at Hoxie on Monday morning, and that's where I've been since. And so June of 22 is when I started there, and I've loved it. It's been a great job.
So you taught all your middle school kids like C21, H30, O2, the formula to look for weeds
That's right.
in your fields.
That's right. Yeah.
And then he called him back that summer and said, "Hey, we need some seasonal help," and I trained you well. So.
That's right. That's right.
Okay.
So yeah, it's been a great thing though. It's been a good transition. I love the pairing of biology with what we do and understanding the importance of the prairie landscape, which is what we're growing. We're growing prairie species, native species that were once everywhere and not around very commonly anymore. And so it's really rewarding in that sense too.
So did you get the bear?
Oh, that is a moment I replay in my mind over and over again. And there's two ways you do that as a hunter, right? When it works out, is probably the second most you think about a shot.
Yeah.
When you actually get a wrap the tag, and then the shot you think about the most is when you miss.
Yeah.
And this old Iowa boy wasn't used to 350-yard shots, and which if I was from out west, that'd be
chip shot.
Yeah. Should I keep my eyes open when I shoot? Or,
Yeah.
And I missed, and but 2 hours later, which is kind of a miracle because this was our first bear hunt. We have a hunt planner that helps us with planning our hunts. We have a deal worked out with him, and so he told us the right unit to hit and the right national forest to be in and everything. But the rest was all spot and stock. And 2 hours later, my hunting buddy tagged a sow without cubs.
Cool.
Right after that, so it was kind of like bittersweet. My bear was a lot bigger than his, but at least we brought one home for a couple of rookie hunters.
It's always good.
Yeah,
that's cool. Well, listeners, this is the type of thing that we like your feedback on. Topics like this, interesting ways, especially when we look at some commodity prices that may not be as stellar as they used to be. We're looking to provide you with the resources to potentially expand your horizon, and we're definitely going to do that today because, Corey, did you know that a prairie farmer is a thing?
I thought it was a magazine.
It does kind of sound like that.
It is. It is a magazine.
Oh, really?
It is, yeah.
I was curious. Google it, Jamie.
Yeah. But this is the type of feedback that we like. So Farm4Profit LLC at gmail.com. Make sure you send that over to us. Or you can text us, right? Corey, do you remember the cell phone number?
515-207-9640.
Look at
Right?
you.
Yo 30.
You're catching on.
I forgot about that.
How do you forget? Prairie Farmer is a farm progress magazine.
Told
It
you.
sure is.
right.
Just like the
I
Wallace
know.
Farmer, but for a different state.
I told you.
Yes.
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah. When you said prairie farmer in the beginning, it did take a minute to, obviously the seeds from prairie have to come from somewhere.
Right, yeah. Yep.
I think of my neighbor up the road, Cindy Hildebrandt. That's like what she does, and it's like all seed right up the road. And I'm like, how's this lady make money? But she's buying farmland, and
Must be pretty good money then.
it must be all right.
Well, let's get into it. What do you guys do?
So we have 53 species growing right now on our farm.
53.
Yeah, it's a lot to manage.
And are those all in like 53 separate fields, or are they all together?
Well, we have
We have closer to 80 fields because we have a lot of species that have more than one field. Just the way that it's got to be rotated.
and we have I think we have one field. Yeah, only one field where we double crop it. So we'll have a species that can be hand harvested rather easily, which is our wild white indigo field, and it's growing in one of our grass species, which is prairie dropseed. And so we'll come through, hand harvest all the pods because the seeds are coming in pods. And really what you can do there is you just come in with some pruning shears and snip them all off.
Wait, how'd that go?
I'd be skinny as heck if I had to hand harvest.
Well,
Look at his shoulders. It's from carrying the
Darn
new
right,
drop
wow.
seeds.
Screw the combine. I don't need that custom harvest stuff. I'll do it myself.
yeah, I mean it's a lot of hand. It's a lot of farming by hand. Let's see, what was it, Tuesday this week, Nicholas? We had a failed harvest on one of our species.
We failed, guys.
Oh no.
But it's common on this species because of how difficult some of them are. Timing is everything. It can be hours that you have to hit it within a window, because think of how these seeds naturally are propagated: wind, water, runoff, animal hide, things like that. And so one of the hardest species to harvest are spiderwort species. And
Spider what?
spiderwort. You guys have probably seen these before because I've noticed you have a lot of prairie in your ditches around here. It's a real bright purple flower. It comes out in May, early June.
Kind
blooms.
of is it fuzzy?
No, it kind of looks like an onion is what it kind of
Oh,
looks
man,
like.
I got that in my ditch. Yeah, heck
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah,
Yep.
it'll bloom in the morning, and then the flower will dry up, fizzle out by noon, maybe 1, 2 o'clock at the latest, and the next day a different flower on that same pod.
Yeah.
So like
There
reblooms.
might have been some spiderwort in that flower vase.
So
out
are the
there.
counties using this kind of seed in the ditch then? They must be.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. It's part of the roadside prairie program.
This
that
purple flower,
UNI
not to be
does.
confused with Iowa's flower, the Canadian thistle.
That's what I thought.
Oh man, I hate Canadian thistles.
God.
Oh.
Dude.
But yeah, so that seed drop, it has a little seed head that opens like this, and as our boss Carol says, gravity works. That seed will fall down into the ground and it's gone at that point. There's nothing you're getting that out of the dirt with. And so when it's time to go, it's time to go. And so we go and swath that into windrows, and then it's best to let it dry because it's a very water saturated plant. It's kind of like probably the best description is like you ever like break open some aloe vera or yucca or something. It's like real wet.
Yeah,
it's like that. So you got to let it dry for usually 2-3 days is best. But because we had all this rain, it's shattering seeds off right away. And then if you remember a few weeks ago, we had all that rain and then 95-degree heat. So we got to go through with a pull type chopper that pitches it onto wagons to pick up those windrows. And Carol is a mechanical genius. He's rigged so many things around our farm to fit what we do because there's just not equipment for it out there. So he's taking. You remember those old Walsh grain wagons, the real short walled.
yeah.
He's put drying floors in a bunch of those, and then we get like little drying fans that mount on the front. And they'll blow air underneath that drying floor, and then we can dry the wagons. And I got to climb in every day with a pitchfork, flip the wagon. So
That's where the shoulders come from.
That is brutal work. Well, this year it was a 95-degree day. We lost a lot of the seed, so we had to do a real wet harvest, and we couldn't get air on them fast enough, And so
and they just turned to mush. Like it was like like compost in there, and it was packed tight, and it was hot, and the thing that kills seed germ the fastest is humid heat. So it can be 95 degrees and you're fine, but if it starts getting humid, your seed germ on some of those species will
rot.
tank.
So I think most, like, if you've had any livestock and had hay, right, and it's the bottom pile of the hay
exactly
is
like
just
that.
nasty.
Yeah, it's exactly like that.
And it smells, and so we've got wagons and wagons of these all like plugged into different, you got to have the different outlets for them so they're not tripping any breakers or different circuits, I guess. And so they're all over the farm. We're trying to blow air on them so they dry out, and it just smells so bad.
Well, and normally it's not like that. Normally, there's a little smell because it's got to dry out, but it's not like what you're talking about, the bottom of the silage, just rotten. So that was my by hand work this week because I got 5 of those wagons to
He's
unload.
texting me like, I'm never going to forgive you for not being here today.
So that you failed on just the spiderwort harvest?
Right, but our other spiderwort harvest was pretty good. So prairie spiderwort is another species. So that was Ohio spiderwort, and then we also grow prairie spiderwort, and that's one of the.
See, it wasn't Iowa spiderwort.
Well, and it's it's part of the reason why we have so many species is you can have a little bit more resiliency when you're so diverse, right? If you have one thing that fails, you miss the window on it. Like some of the asters where the seeds can blow away in a windstorm, or switchgrass which gets shattered off by a hard rain or something. Then
or we've had hail that and Dad had crop insurance on switchgrass once upon a time, and our switchgrass field, peak retail, if I moved all of it retail, we might get $60,000, $75,000 worth off of the acres that we've got of switchgrass. And the insurance company, they do their insurance company math, and it's not subsidized because it's not specific crops. So he got a check for like $3,500, and he was like, "Well, I'm not paying for this crop insurance."
Right.
So I don't think any of it's insured anymore after he took the switchgrass out. But so the diversity, that's like a really big part of what we do. But then in the office, I'm like desperately looking around trying to find markets for 50-something odds. Well, usually it's 40-something. We usually fail on
usually there's a few that just don't come back from one year to the next very well. We have to rotate our fields too. It's not as frequently usually as like corn is good for corn. But for our Forbes, I would say a good average number of years is probably that 5 to 7 window, but some are as quick as 3.
So when you're growing a field of one of these species, is it all that species, or is there like a cover crop? Is it with switchgrass, or like in its natural habitat?
Just that one field. We've got white wild indigo
monoculture,
and prairie drop seed. Everything else is monocultured, and they're small. This maybe some of the fields are as small as maybe 2 of these rooms. Yeah, and so I was Travis Frank, the Flush podcast. We were talking on his podcast and explaining like, no, with optimal use, like 10 acres, you can make a living off of 10 acres.
I was just going to go there. I'm so ADD that we went from studying Bible to studying chemistry or biology to talking seed varieties and
Not
weeds.
bears.
and we're titled Making a Living on 10 Acres. And then the title on my sheet here says Enhancing Agriculture Profitability and Sustainability. What's our episode, Tanner?
This is a literally a trip down an avenue that none of our listeners, probably less than 1% of our listeners, have any experience with. And it is, what can we do to make our farm more profitable? And we don't have to take an entire 3,000 acre farm to do this. So the goal is to learn about what they're doing at their seed company, how they're raising these additional varieties, and where that can be implemented in maybe a diversification of our listeners' farms.
So do we just want to do this on like the guy like me that only owns 70 acres, or do we want Corey to convert 10,000 acres into way more profit, and then he's like, well, screw you guys, I don't need 20,000 acres, I got 5 that are awesome?
Yeah, see, to me, I'm going to let them drive the conversation, but ultimately what this is, in my opinion, going to do is it's going to give 2 options. It's going to give somebody that opportunity to come home, and it's potentially going to give somebody the opportunity to take what they have and generate higher levels of revenue. So I want to explore deeper into what you just started talking about as to how you can take these native brands, the prairie brands, you being a prairie farmer, and turn that into a profit on 10 acres.
Yeah. Yep. Well, let me first start by saying it's hard to grow prairie for a lot of different things. I'm not saying other ways of farming isn't hard, but there's a lot less research in how it's done. We don't have hybrids. We don't have things that can weather droughts or weather too much water or stuff like that. So there's a difficulty, there's a higher risk, and there's no market. Now, the plus side of that is I can sell it at whatever I want to sell it at, but there's no safety net, right? So
when you say there's no market, there's no clearinghouse like the Chicago Board of Trade.
Yes, yep, exactly. Sorry, there's no
because there's a market.
Yes.
Otherwise, you guys wouldn't be making money.
That's right.
Right.
Thank you.
Right.
And it's a market that's a little harder to tap into, and there's a lot more leniency. So, for instance, I was talking to someone. I just sold a bunch of our rough Blazing Star for $285 a pound, and then I was talking to someone on the phone, and they were like, "Yeah, this company out of Montana just bought all we had for $700 a pound." I was like, "Oh, dang it! I would have loved to find those people."
That was the flower I was talking about.
Yeah.
Yes.
I have that out in our CRP.
Yeah.
Oh man,
that's awesome.
That's a nice stand of CRP if you got that in there.
Well,
That's
it was a wildflower mix.
okay.
Yeah. A poll like that. Did you put it in
Pollinators,
2017?
I couldn't tell you the number. It was several years ago, but
Yeah.
it's been a pain in the butt, and that's why I hate Canadian thistles.
Oh, dude.
Yeah, because
They'll kick your butt, man.
It does look similar to Canadian thistle. Yeah.
Yeah. But in terms, like, if someone wanted to grow prairie, there's a good market for it. It does fluctuate like every other market. But
So why do you call it growing prairie? Because to me, I'd say I'm a rough Blazing Star farmer.
yeah.
I'm a corn farmer. I'm a soybean farmer.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Why do you call it prairie?
Because the variety.
Yeah. So going back to kind of what you were talking about earlier, I think it was Corey that was asking about, are you growing this in a more of like a matrix of multiple species, or are you
Because
growing?
that's what I think about when I think of a prairie.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so when when you have so many different species, that's kind of what dominate. Diversity is like our biggest word, right? For better or worse, right? That term, people probably get sick of us saying it all the time, but it's like it's a diverse operation. We got to have diverse knowledge on all these different species, diverse harvest time, planting time, equipment that is required, and so just like prairie in of itself, a healthy prairie is going to have 100+ species.
Oh, really?
And like true, if you go set back the clock like 500 years ago, and all this area would have for sure been prairie here. You would have, if you did like we'll say maybe a square mile or something.
You could do 1 acre.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. That's probably easier to visualize. 1 acre, you would easily come up with, if you just did a survey, I'm going to count every species I see, easy 100 species. And some place even more diverse.
It's like when we were out California, they had 26 different crops they raised. They weren't just
200.
corn farmers or bean farmers. It was high value crops out there. What do we call
A prairie.
prairie?
High value prairie.
High value prairie.
We're hoping it's high value.
So
'cause
I'm
that's
wondering,
what-
like, my mind's already going, you got a guy that's given $700, and you got another guy that's given $200, and you have no market that will set what the price is. So when I think of beef cattle, I think of, let's go to the auction. And we want to know what somebody's willing to give. They have a collective of all the buyers, and they come to buy your product for you. Is there any auction clearinghouse for prairie that everybody comes to, like that is the set guy?
No, there's a couple giant companies. It's not a huge market in general. I mean, you're talking less than $200 million probably in the Midwest as a total. And
Because the main use is new road construction, development, and CRP.
yeah, CRP is probably 75%.
Oh, really?
of it.
Okay.
Minnesota gets into more because they got all those lakes. They're trying to protect the water quality. They plant a lot of prairie around there. They do it a lot on solar farms, and there's more of a culture. So we actually sell a lot of our prairie in really small, like 500 square feet little baggies online. So we just have a website where people go and they order it.
Yeah, someone's got a yard and they don't want to look at grass. They want to have prairie in there.
Or they don't want to mow 6
Yeah.
acres, so they'll put
Right.
3 of it into, prairie.
short pollinator mix or something
Yeah,
like
and
that.
then you get butterflies and bees and all that kind of,
So when we're talking about making money at this, if you do have 10 acres and they want to put 6 acres and only mow 4, do they get any government assistance? Is there any, like I think a CRP, so Conservation Reserve Program, they're going to get paid from the government but also get some kind of harvest off of it.
Yeah.
Is that what your operators are doing, or are they counting on the government payment side of it or the subsidy?
That's a really good question. We actually lobby for things for this topic, right? So you guys know Economics 101. It's based on value you can bring to the economy. Everyone's bringing value, trading value for one another, and we call that dollars, right? Well, the value with prairie hasn't been turned into dollars as much as we think it should be. We were chatting with a gentleman in our podcast named Ted Cook, and he has been lobbying with the Biden administration to get farmers paid for farming wildlife and water quality and soil quality. And by that, he doesn't mean we farm as in we go and extract those things. The wildlife, for instance, different grouse species, he wants landowners to be paid to have habitat for grouse species to flourish. He says we need to, for the people who own the land, we need it to make sense to them. So frankly, I believe there's a economic and cultural lag on people getting paid for having high quality habitat and having prairie on their land. I think because we're just now recognizing the value. We've never had to. For thousands of years, we didn't have to. And just now in the last 100, we're kind of like, oh, those hills are getting really eroded.
Yeah.
That looks like a lot of clay on them. I'm seeing a lot of orange on that hillside. Maybe we should put some prairie there. So I think people really are starting to understand it plays a big part. But then the money's got to follow, right, and get into the marketplace.
Well, you can see, I mean, just if I was going to play devil advocate for a minute, like, I'm a hunter, so yes, I appreciate the more species and that and the habitat, right? But if I'm someone trying to feed my family, do I care if there's more grouse out on the ground?
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? Like,
Right.
So that's
why it's got to
that's
make
the
sense
biggest
for those
headwind.
landowners.
Yeah.
Yep. And so that's why we're lobbying, like, hey, this is something, if we're going to put money in other places for habitat, like in BLM out west and stuff like that, let's do it. Let's make it make sense for people who own land here in the Midwest. Not just like begging them to do it because we feel like it's a good thing to do to put 10% of your stuff aside. Let's all together kind of come together and be like, hey, we'll pay you for for this.
Do you know, last time we said BLM on the podcast, these guys about crapped a brick. And I said Bureau of Land Management, Bureau of Land Management. They didn't even skip a beat when you said it, but by God, when I said it, they were on all.
Well, he also used it in a different context than you did.
Yeah.
Well, and to be fair, Nick crapped a brick the first time I said it on one of our podcasts too. What are you talking about?
Whoa. I don't know where
What
it's
was
the
the song?
government's responsibility, though, to compensate people to more land stewardship. So is it the landowner? So we got two advocates here. One, just like you said, devil's advocate. I'm a businessman. I'm going to make money over here. I'm going to do this. Although I'm a hunter, I do like the natural prairie, but okay, is it the government's responsibility and me as a taxpayer to incentivize that we get more BLM, natural prairie, et cetera, et cetera? I don't know where the stance is there, and I think that's where a lot of people that pay taxes would be like, screw natural prairie, just let it grow up. It probably does it itself. So how much education do you have to do here?
Yeah, that's a super tough one. This goes back to what I was first saying about value, right? If all there is value in $1, then it frankly prairie does not matter.
Okay.
Who cares? But if there is value past the $1, now don't get me wrong, I'm not saying dollars have good value to them, but if there is value past the $1, if there's value in health and value in nature and enjoying the beauty of it, if there's any value in that, then I think there is a place in the marketplace, whether it's public or private, to be had for high quality, diverse prairies.
Well, and let's face it, the CRP program is somewhat of a set-aside that the government controls how much crop production is in production, right? It's not always the buffer next to a stream.
Right.
So it's their way of kind of, we have acres set aside if we need them.
Yeah.
So why not be a prairie mix that's going to help,
Right.
with pollinators and not, have things go extinct.
But we're also not, I shouldn't say we're not. The goal of the direction of this message isn't for people to go plant prairie.
Yeah. No.
The goal is to be able to educate them on how they can raise the species that go into prairie mixes and that get utilized. But obviously, like Dave was saying, you have to have a market to sell. So if there isn't anybody interested in planting prairie, if we don't have a CRP program, if we don't have buffer strips, if we don't have anything that is going to utilize the seed, now you don't even have a market.
Right.
But when we get back into what you're doing with your business is you're growing seed stock.
Yes.
Exactly. Yep.
And then you're taking that seed stock and you're going to create a mix, whether it's customized or you're going to have a strategic approved mix that goes into place. That's what you're here to tell our listeners, or at least educate our listeners on, is how they can grow native species that can go into prairies, correct?
Yeah. Yep. Absolutely. And I think, because I have like 100 spreadsheets saying exactly what it costs to grow the different species and how much
That's
money
your
we
type
made
of
on.
guy.
He's a freak in the sheets too.
Look, man, I spend a lot of time.
He's gonna hang his hat on that compliment too much.
We'll clip it. We'll clip it for you.
Thanks. Oh man, the hard part is diversity is on spreadsheets. It's like, why would we even grow these other ones? These 10 make us all our money basically. Why do these? But there is value in having the other one. We get to build our mixes the way we want to. We're not dependent on insourcing or outsourcing other companies. Big Blue Stem, I don't have to get it from South Dakota. I know where it came from. I know the quality. So there's pieces like that. But in terms of like jumping in and growing prairie, I have a lot of people call and ask, hey, do you buy? And we do. We buy quite a bit from hand pickers, and we're starting to buy from other people who are growing. And what I tell them is, like, just find a couple of species that are kind of hard to grow and just give them just like a 1/10 of an acre, several rows of it. Just do that. And if you get really good at growing this species that's quote unquote hard to grow, or maybe no one's figured it out because it is very hard, or maybe no one's figured it out because there's a lot of species out there and there's not that many companies that grow it. Mm-hmm. So find 1, 2, maybe 5 that you're really good at growing. Get them on 10 acres. You're going to be one of 3 people that grow them in the United States. Charge what you want for them.
I got $1 million question for you now.
Yeah.
All right. So you said it's confusing sometimes. So I bought some corn seed this year, and it's super confusing because they'll have these crazy labels like Q946429.
Because it's a hybrid and
Because
got
it's a hybrid.
traits and
Do you
all
guys
that.
have a catalog with like all these crazy numbers, or do you just say what it is, like Big Blue Stem,
Yeah.
or
Yep.
is it got some kind of crazy number associated with
No,
it?
no, because we don't have like any of that IP attached to it.
Oh.
We technically have like a source. We have to document where we sourced it originally, but besides that, the most I will ever say is Iowa Big Blue Stem. But if it's not from Iowa, I don't even bother saying what state it's from.
Because you don't own
Yeah, there's a few big
natural.
There's a few
things like
big bids where you get preference based on where your seed is sourced from.
Oh.
You get like a preference point, right, in the bid. And so like anything with DOT.
They want locally grown.
Exactly.
Well, if it's going to be natural to the area, you
Right.
want
Yep.
it to
Right.
be close, right?
Right, exactly.
So-
You want to do as well as it can in that soil type, in that growth zone, in that climate, and so there are advantages to having some of that documentation.
As
But
a marketing guy, you guys need to label it that way, like Big Blue Stem DOT.579.
I think they do.
Yeah.
They have don't you have like DOT mixes or?
Oh yeah. And then we're just at that point we just like DOT mix 12. You
Like
know,
it.
it's just that's how they look at it.
I feel like I would just be taking DOT officers to lunch all the time and be like, hey, I've got the perfect mix for you.
There is a giant prairie company
That's
in
not what I
Iowa.
thought you were going to say. I thought there is a giant DOT officer that really likes Culvers.
I send them
It's a
cheese
cheese
curds.
curd, yeah.
There you
Just
go.
in the mail. No, there's a real big prairie company that basically has cornered Iowa's market. They did a good job. They were in it before anybody else, and
From Winterset.
Nor
Yeah.
named. Oh,
they might be. So anybody's going to be able to figure this out after a quick Google. So Dan Allen started the company. It's called Allen Dan, and I think
Creative.
they're the big. Yeah, I know, clever. I think they're the biggest wildflower farm. Like they produce the most pounds of wildflowers of any company in the United States.
And
I'm pretty sure.
they have come up in conversation of buying ground or like big time money.
Yeah.
Like they've been doing it a long time.
Yeah. Oh yeah, and they do sod, and you know, and then so they're pretty diversified. I mean, they probably grow 180 species. They do a really good job, and so we've bought and sold with them because there's not that many companies. So if we're out of something or they're out of something, we're like swapping seed, you know, and they've done a really good job of that. They just met with the people that are making decisions here in the state.
Well, and you guys were talking earlier about there has to be value beyond just the government is going to take money from its constituency and they're going to make that money available to seed producers, right?
Yeah.
And so a big part of what we've been doing is trying to like essentially meet up with the people that already have that value, right? You guys are both hunters. I'm a hunter. We would cry for a very long time if we lost all of our public land access out west, right? If of course there's some leasing options and stuff like that you can go through, and a lot of people do that, but it's just nice knowing that there's always a spot I could go, right? And that when I get there, there's going to be habitat where there's animals that can be found so I can be successful in my hunt, right? So we already have a value there. And there's a lot of other people out there like that. And in the Midwest especially, and in the North and down South, there's a lot of people with that value that own land that are looking to improve where they hunt on their own land. And so hunting has actually been another avenue for us that we're really trying to be there to support these folks who are wanting to add habitat value to their own ground that they have and already have. They're practically, and I guess you would say physically, buying in to or financially probably be a better way of buying into this idea of having these species, right? And so a lot of that is on Nick's, desk to locate those
See
markets.
there? Wasn't Nicholas? It was Nick.
You wouldn't believe how many times off air I've been like, hey, can you call me Nicholas when we're on air?
can't help it.
He
Like,
just doesn't.
Every kid in my growing up, every kid named Nicholas went by Nick. It's like He's the first Nicholas I've ever met that goes by Nicholas.
Got a new drinking game,
Except
Corey.
for
3 times so
except
far.
for Santa Claus, Saint Nicholas.
Yeah, that's right. But yeah, that's where we're trying to grow as a company is find those markets where that value already exists.
So Tanner, let's put some numbers to it. You're a numbers guy. I just bought a farm, and maybe it's too many acres. Okay, so on 70, 80 acres, it might be even too much to do something
But
like
you
this.
could do it in your little corners.
Correct.
Or like on the edge.
But square some stuff off on point rows
Yeah.
or something. Make that there. What's it look like? My listeners, I know they're asking right now. Okay, I make this much per acre on corn and beans. Why the heck would I go this direction? What's an average person expect to make, input costs? I mean,
Why don't you choose
lots of questions.
Choose a couple species, Nick. I think that Nicholas would actually make it easier to illustrate.
My guess is it's more time than anything else, than
Yeah.
A lot of
money
time,
or
yeah.
anything like that.
I mean, we have 5 full-time people on 500 acres, and my mom. So I always joke that my dad, his only goal in life is to make more money than my mom spends. She loves it. But so there's money to be made per acre for sure, but also 5 full-time people that are very busy, or the equivalent. We have several part-time.
Yeah.
Add them together.
Yep.
And with for June grass, we recently harvested June grass. The combine that we have, you could buy for $1,500. We used an old Alice Chalmers 185 that you buy for a few $1,000. Short little grass. I have it agreed already. I have another company that buys most all of it every year, and we're gonna get a little over 100 pounds, 120 pounds off of 2.5 acres. So 120 pounds of this seed, and I'm for sure not going to sell it for less than $110, and I'm shooting for $150 a pound. So you do the math there, you're looking at $20-something thousand on 2.5 acres. And I mean, Kent and I definitely spent time out there, probably 20 hours worth of time out there. But then it's just the fact that the demand's pretty high and the supply is nil. Again, if you figure out how to grow a good species, you might be one of 2 or 3 people that grow it in the world.
Scarcity.
So why not plant more of it? I know you said diversity, but there's got to come a point to where I'm going to take 2 more acres.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, we talked about it, span of control, as we started the whole deal. There's 5 things we can do really doggone good, so why try for 45?
Yeah.
Right.
There's a premium limit, and as soon as you go over that premium, all of a sudden, you're selling at wholesale prices, and I don't. If I can avoid it on most species, I will just take my premium.
So you're planting, for example, on just this type of crop, you're planting what you know is about going to yield what you've got sold.
Yeah. I
Exactly.
could probably do up to 200 pounds, which would be significant, but I don't want to toe that line. I don't want to accidentally sell, and then they have 1 year where they only sell half of it, so the next year they're kind
Can
of...
you do that with aronia berries?
I had aronia berries, but I don't have many more.
I heard they're hard to sell. Is that true?
The
why it doesn't
market
have
is
many
not
more.
there yet.
Yeah. But there's a lot of people trying. Why is that?
I
same
think it's
reason-
easy to. I think it's relatively easy to grow.
Okay.
And it's that it looks like a berry. I mean, it is berry. It looks like a blueberry.
They
And
taste good.
I don't mind them. I don't mind them. You can get some tart, astringent ones, but they don't. You don't pick up a whole handful and eat like you do blueberries. You pick up a couple because it's like that dry wine. Takes the moisture out of your mouth. So people don't sit down and eat a half pint.
But the people that are trying it are doing it for the same reason they're listening to this episode.
Yeah.
They're
Right.
looking for a
For an
way to
alternative
increase
way.
the revenue on their farm without taking an extensive amount of their operation. I mean, this sounds like something, just like Dave said, if you wanted to square off where your point rows are, you could potentially invest in the knowledge and the process of growing a native species and put this in place.
Yeah, another thing that I think factors in there is, so it could be, with June grass, you're going to want to machine harvest that. For somebody who's just wanting to use a corner of their property, something that's easy to care for is another good thing. Something that can be planted on rows, and you can do that a couple different ways. You can plug plant them, right? You could get a plug planter, which is a device that it's kind of like a giant roller wheel that you feed plugs that you grew in a greenhouse to, and then it lays down the the tarp on the ground and punches the plugs through, or you could do it by hand. We are friends with a lavender farm where they were plug planting by hand a lot of lavender plants. So you could do that, or we use an old corn planter and old Deutz Alice. We're an orange farm. Carol, our founder, he grew up on Alice, and so we use an old corn planter, 6-row planter, and we have to put some kind of filler medium because we're dealing with really tiny seeds most of the time, and then we'll just plant those on rows, and then you get like a post direct or hooded sprayer, and you can spray in between the rows, and that takes care of most of the weed pressure, and then if you got to do a little bit of maintenance with a hoe and a shovel, just depending on how bad the pressure is, the types of weeds, and then the biggest thing for people is, so this is where like a lot of hand pickers that come to us to sell some of the seed that maybe they grew or they were picking out of road ditches or wherever.
You could do that.
They don't they don't know how to clean the seed, right? And so I spent all winter cleaning the seed that we harvest. We have some old clipper seed cleaners that use gravity. They use screens. They use brushes and all sorts of stuff to basically sift the seed down by size and density. And so if you could find a species that you could grow in a small amount of area, you could take care of a lot of the work by hand, and you can clean easily. So I'm thinking of species like legume species like indigo. Remember earlier when I was telling you about how we hand harvest that field? They're grown in pods. Weed pressure is not bad because it's a tall plant, so you don't have to worry about getting choked out as bad as some of the like clovers and things that are growing closer to the ground. And because you're hand harvesting, you don't have to worry about weed seeds getting into your good seed, right? Because that's really where you can lose credibility as a native seed supplier is
You throw a bunch of Canadian thistles.
exactly.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, or a few years ago, what was that species? It was a type of amaranth.
Palmer amaranth.
That got out into the market, and this,
that came through CRP, didn't it?
Yeah.
Yes, it did.
It was 2017. It was a crazy year. The government was paying like $300 an acre for pollinator, and seed companies, people who had never sold seed in their life, were selling it. They'd get on Google and middleman it from Arkansas, and I think that's where they ended up finding it from, is Arkansas. So
yeah, so if someone wants to do this on their own property, the place I would start is call us, right? Or if you're somewhere, if you got a local producer or seed salesperson near you, call them and be like, okay, what do you need or what do you want more of? And that'd be now you're finding the quickest market, right? You got a place that right down the road, you can drop seed off, get a check. Or say, okay, what kind of projects are you getting a lot of work for that you need a certain species for, or what's something that if I were to grow, you would take every ounce of it, and then start there. Okay, so now I know I have a high desire. That's where that price tag is going to be high, right? Then I would go by, okay, what can I do with the least amount of equipment? Because as you guys know, as farmers, the equipment black hole of, it would be really nice if we had something that could take care of this for us. It can turn into that really quick. So least amount of equipment needed. Then you don't have to worry about storage, maintenance, and all that stuff too. And then the easiest to clean. So because then you have to set up a whole nother part of infrastructure, which is seed cleaning, right? And so.
But you can get away with hand sifting seed cleaning. So if you have a quarter acre and you're only planning on getting 20 pounds off of it, you could just hand sift. It might take you 6, 7, 8 hours. You sit in front of the TV for a while and hand sift it out. We've had people do that.
But as somebody, I can't remember who said it, but hard work, yes. It's going to, it's not, Like, it's not an easy thing, you know. I tell
It's
people
not like Instagram sunflowers that you just
exactly.
you plant them in the corner of your field and people pay you $5 to go take a picture. Or,
Right,
I
exactly.
mean, you said lavender. There's a lot of people that go to lavender farms
yeah.
just to take pictures because it's a
Right.
beautiful crop.
Yeah.
I only assume your guys' operation is beautiful too.
Oh yeah. We have some fields that just are stunning. You know, we had a event last year, Prairie Appreciation Day, and we had our rough blazing star field was just in its prime, and you usually get 1 or 2 years of a species being in its prime, and then that's the other hard part too is you need to get on a good rotation where you can, every. I think I said earlier that 5 to 7 is probably about average for a forward field, which is where most of the money is going to be. You can get about 5 to 7 years out of it, then you're going to have to rotate. And a good way to rotate is to do soybeans for a couple years in between. You can get some value out of that. Now, if it's just a small plot, I mean, how much value are you getting out of 10 acres of soybeans? Mm-hmm. But maybe if it's
not much right now.
Yeah, right. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Oh. But maybe if you're growing this in a spot that you can hunt, well, now you have a 10-acre soybean food plot, or maybe you could grow organic soybeans or something that's got a little bit different marketability to it, and then choose another species that fits those parameters I talked about earlier. And there are some species, like Nicolas said, once you just name off maybe a few of the highest value species.
Well, like world milkweed, you couldn't hand pick it during its harvest season fast enough for you to out hand pick what I'd be able to take and move in the market.
World
milkweed.
Is that the big milkweed?
No, that's common. The world milkweed's like 24 inches tall.
You've probably seen it along the side of the road. It likes disturbed ground like gravel or cow, cow pasture or stuff like that.
Yeah.
Like grow on concrete.
You might see it.
My favorite TikTok. Concrete.
That right there on the right, towards the top. Nope, one higher. Yeah, that's world.
Okay.
And it's not that tall. But I paid. Let's see. Recently I paid $350. I've paid $700 for it per pound.
Great. Now the guy that just heard you only paid $350 is going.
This is like drug dealing here, man. You're talking like some big numbers.
Hey, don't be telling the last guy what I paid for this. Right?
Well, you always have
seed.
said if you can sell it by the pound, that's better than selling it by the bushel.
So is there any way to use this as a cover crop? Is there, perennial and annual? Is there an annual seed that I can buy and use as a cover crop with my current operation?
Oh, that is a great question. Not that I'm aware of. But
there are some annual prairie species. None of them that I can think of are used in any kind of cover cropping.
If we can invent that, we'd be rich.
Tillage
Yes.
What about like partridge? What about partridge pea? Any chance?
That's a biennial.
It's a biennial technically, but it fizzles out after the second year.
How do you spell partridge?
Yep, just like you did. Yep.
So next question, can you bale it? Is there any consumer at the end that just wants to bale up prairie grass and then like, oh, my cows they weren't grain fed.
Roughage.
They weren't even grass fed. These were prairie fed cattle.
Yeah, there you go.
And I'm going to put a label on it that says these are like healthier cows because I said so.
There's our website gets a ton of traction for our pasture mixes because people are starting to realize like, actually, if one of my lots can be prairie, you can do cool season and then your prairie warm season, that big blue stem, this switchgrass, the tonnage is like a lot of tonnage going on there, and cows, it's candy, big blue stem, and you add minimal legumes, but then there's other species you can go in there and add really high nutrition, and then by the time that's kind of wearing out, you got your cool seasons coming back again, and so it makes a really good rotational.
Yeah, it's good. Yeah, it's great for rotational grazing. You could have different separate paddocks if you're doing a paddock grazing operation, which there's a lot of ground being gained there. A lot of people are seeing the value in returning to that way of raising cattle, pasture-fed cattle. But the problem there is the cool season grasses are one of the biggest enemies to prairie, right? They green up earlier, so they are getting that sunlight faster. A lot of them grow on a rhizome, so they kind of form those thick mats. And prairie species are bunch grasses, so they they do not compete in that way. And so for pasture, for pasture mixes, that can be one of the challenges. But from like you were saying, a baling strategy, there is some marketability there. We've had some people inquire on that. We've sold quite a few bales over the years of going back in and getting the big blue. But that's also where you got to get outside the box too and see where the value. Like that was a great point you made earlier when you're talking about people are literally can charge money for people to come get their family pictures taken in your field.
Yeah, agritourism.
Well, right, exactly. And another part of that is we have some of the best pheasant hunting in the state of Iowa on our farm, right? People see that. They drive by. In fact, that's the first time I ever saw hawks. It was years ago. I went to my grandparents' farm. Terrible day of pheasant hunting with my buddy. And we're like, man, we need to find a place that's got a bunch of like tall prairie grass. We got to find a place. And we're so busy complaining about our bad day of hunting. I took a wrong turn and drove past. Like, we need a place like that, And
that's why he applied.
That's right.
Honestly,
I've had some good hunts out there. But that's another part of it is if you're like really into deer hunting, well, then you section off that part of your farm. Nobody comes over here, right? But that over there, that big pasture over there, have it. Go ahead and hunt pheasants over there. It's going to be $100 a gun. So we've made some money that way too.
And we've sold to some pharmaceutical companies. Like we'll bail up species. There was Lespedeza capitata, was round-headed bush clover.
Yep.
We had 2 separate fields. We had one for seed, and then we had one that every other was seed. And then on the other rotating years, we'd bail up hundreds of bales, and we'll bail up these bales, and then we have to like wrap them, and then we'd ship them out to the East Coast to these pharmaceutical companies. And that was probably the most per acre on a non-hand-picked species I've ever seen.
That's what you're getting when you go to Starbucks. You get a mocha chocolate, right there. That's what's in it.
Round-headed bush
guarantee
clover.
it.
Do you guys grow bee balm?
Yep. Yeah, wild bergamot.
So I have a half acre of bee balm.
Okay.
It's not mine. It's Kemen's. So
Okay.
they're doing research on it they told me it was like cancer research, but then I talked to an ex-employee there, and he said something is a binder that they're getting out of it for something.
I heard, so we had a gentleman inquire several years about our field, and the problem is we're only going to rip up our field once out of every 5, 6, 7 years, so we're not willing to rip it up, because it takes 2 or 3 years to get a species growing and doing well. But they were asking about, I guess there was an oil that they could squeeze out of it that did well. I'm not sure what it was for, but yeah, we get those kinds of calls as well. That specialty.
And then before that they had marigolds out there. They were doing that for the pigment in marigolds, something with your eye health. They were. Okay. On that. So they had an 80-acre field of marigolds.
Yeah, it's really something when you see some of these things growing at scale. That was one of my favorite parts when I started there. It's just like as I'd go through the different blooming seasons, it's like you get blown away
right
every time.
So how many natural species are in like Iowa for prairie?
Like originally? Or?
Yeah, or are you grow 53 now? But how many do you think there was or is if you actually found
300 is a pretty good number, right around there. Prairie kind of will follow the conditions that it likes, right?
Okay.
So if you
I was going to ask, can you grow prairie anywhere?
The answer is most places, yes. Anywhere, no. And some places just straight up won't grow somewhere. We have to grow some of our species where we have shade on the farm because it's a shade preferred species like tall bellflower, for instance. It really likes that tree line. Or, by the way, that's another way you can make a lot of money on a small amount of acres is if you could grow shade tolerant species. Some examples of those are very valuable ones. Blue phlox would be a good one.
Wild geranium, snake root.
Yep.
They're like very expensive species because shade's crazy hard to mimic, when you're producing.
But the nice thing is a lot of the seed stock for these species is already there because timberland hasn't been.
I mean, you could do it with shade cloth, right?
Yes. Yeah, but then getting like large equipment under there, so that now you're talking about the manual labor.
Yeah. But you can
building.
A couple pounds of blue phlox and you got yourself probably close to $3,000-4,000.
Yeah, I mean you can almost set your price with blue phlox. You know, and the amount of people demanding it's very, very small. But I don't know. It is kind of interesting with the shaded species because they're so expensive, but they're so difficult to work with and find. And usually they don't grow very tall, so you're basically on your hands and knees trying to get around.
But yeah, there again, you're talking to a narrow, a small amount of people that are going to be interested in doing this. So they probably already understand, yeah, this is going to be hard work, but it's the kind of hard work I like doing. And that's what it comes down to for me every day. I know I have to work hard every day physically, but I like that.
It's not a room full of middle school kids.
That's it. Yeah. I have told myself that so many times. Man, pitching these wagons is pretty bad, but it ain't school.
So we've talked prairie, but like wetlands is a big thing too, and there's a bunch of natural species for wetlands. Are you growing anything for that?
Yeah, so actually a lot of prairie, it's such a broad term, and there's, we were just talking with a gentleman who's an expert at the Hitchcock Nature Reserve, which is where most of Iowa's remnant prairie is at the Luss Hills, because you can't farm the Luss Hills. And he was saying that every single hill facing the sun or away from the sun, no matter what you get, even if they have the exact same conditions, they won't be more than 70% similar to one another. So it's very diverse. You get about 300 species that kind of mix and match. With wet, you get a lot of sedges. And wetlands, very hard to mimic, again, because either you have to irrigate or you got to get a lot of rain or you got to be in a bottom somewhere. And so sedges are pretty expensive. A lot of them are. And they're kind of fickle. And 1 year we'll get 300 pounds of Bicknell sedge. The next year we'll get 40. And you just don't know what you're going to get off of it. And if you get 40 and everybody else gets 40, it's kind of whatever. But let's say you get 40 and 2 other people get 40, but the 4th person who grows it gets 500 pounds. They have a bumper year just because they had more rain and they were in, Minnesota or something. And so everybody else is like, well, I don't even get a higher price because the supply is actually roughly the same. And that's when it's a bummer.
Right.
And that also illustrates what your question was earlier. Does prairie grow anywhere and everywhere? And so it kind of takes hold where it's adapted to. So swamp milkweed, well, it's going to grow where the sedges are growing. Whereas near like a disturbed area, maybe back in the day it would have been like a elk wallow or buffalo wallow. You're going to have a lot of like hoary vervain and world milkweed where it has that disturbed open soil, and then across just like ground like this out here, a lot of mesic, flat, a little bit of roll to it ground. You're going to have a lot of your big 5 grasses, big blue stem, Indian grass, little blue stem, and the taller forbs that can compete with that kind of shade cover from those taller grasses.
But I would say no matter your soil conditions or how much shade or not shade, there's like something that you could pick to grow there that would not only do well but have some real value to it.
Right.
So
we're getting a little long in the tooth for Tanner's taste of podcasts, but I do got to ask the title, Dave, like Dave said, is grow or come back to the farm with 10 acres, right? What's the scale? What can the market bear if 100 of our listeners come back and put 10 acres in? Is that too much?
If only
100 flood the market.
If only 100 went in and put 10 acres in, no, that wouldn't flood the market. Yeah. Minnesota basically could eat all the native seed that is grown right now, but some of our native seed, if it doesn't get used for CRP within our region of Iowa, southeastern Iowa, we'll ship it to Minnesota. We'll ship it to South Dakota. I recently shipped a bunch to Nebraska.
Why would you do that?
Yeah,
because it's a very ugly state. Beautification. This questions breed questions. So say you get 200 pounds of seed and you sell 100 of it. Is it good the next year, or are you always constantly testing germination and all that?
Yep. And some seed does great. So some people will only grow things they know they can hold on to 4, 5, 6 years because they kind of have that relationship with their bank where they need to have the inventory. But, so some of our species hold, I think Big Blue Stem will hold 8, 9, 10 years, whereas we have Prairie drop seed. You test it once. If you don't sell in that test, forget about it.
Really?
Yeah. You know, it's going to drop from like an 85, 90% germ to like a 17%
Which
germ.
is why this stuff has gone by the wayside. It's not the farming. It's always crazy to me that we go clear land that has never had, it's just been sod, right? Never had a weed on it. And then, by God, that buttonweed's going to come, or that cocklebur, or whatever that's been sitting in there for 50 years or whatever.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
like, how the heck?
Or clover. My uncle recently cleared out some CRP, and there was no clover in this CRP. And it had been CRP for 30 years, and he put some beans in. Now he was fighting clover in it. He couldn't believe it.
Yeah, those legume seeds, they just have such a durable seed coat on them, and they can lie dormant for so long, you know. Yeah, for sure.
Well, I don't know if this went the direction that I was expecting it to go off the start, but I love the way it went because we explored a lot of different information that it piqued our interest. I mean, literally, I think we looked at our outlines. Never.
I didn't look at the outline.
Correct. And that means that we were purely curious, which means our listeners are going to be purely curious as well.
Good.
So we're going to send them to hoxieNativeSeeds.com.
Yep.
HOKSEY, nativeseeds.com, if they've got questions, because they might be able to partner with you guys. Like I said, you could be a buyer.
Yep.
Yeah.
Call you, find out what they want to do. But I'm going to try and summarize what we talked about today, and you let me know if you want to add anything at the end of this. But we took a former Bible researcher and teacher and turned them into prairie farmers. Oh, we didn't do that. They did that to
Biology
themselves.
teacher. Yep.
Yep. So anyway, we learned that there are prairie farmers, that is a thing. And we're
Not just a magazine.
Correct. We're not just farming what a prairie looks like. We're actually farming the native seeds that go into prairie and go into the mixes and blends.
Prairie for profit.
Prairie for profit.
There it is.
We got a new T-shirt idea.
There you go.
That's right. Would you wear a shirt with flowers on it?
Heck yeah.
Okay.
Have you seen our, I don't have it on right now, but have you seen our shirts?
We learned that you can mechanically harvest, you can hand harvest. We also learned that there is very little protection. It comes with high risk, but the reward can also be really high as far as that goes. They had a failed harvest this year. Their spiderwort.
Ohio spiderwort.
Ohio spiderwort was too. Nobody likes spiders.
I just want to come. I want all the names. Like I want all the shirts. Like Ohio spiderwort farmer.
That's the sublimation. The sublimation is just the words of all of the
different
native
flowers.
species.
Make
Yeah,
tattoos
you've
like
got
that.
53 different species on your shirt.
That sounds like a good one. We'll take 10% royalties on those.
There we go.
shirts.
Oh, it's a partnership.
As long as we get
That's
10% royalties on the sales of the seed.
we know that the seed gets used in a lot of different fashions. CRP is the number one driver, it sounds like, but when it comes into buffer strips or ditch work or beautiful front yards, that we can certainly see a value for where this crop could go. We know that you can do it in a small area, and you could scale it up to as large as your property can handle. And if you've got the tolerance, the ability to do so, grow a shade crop, I think was one of the bigger pullaways that we had here. But be careful. It's like a box of chocolates. I wrote that down because you never know what you're going to get. You could get 40 pounds one year and 200 pounds the next year. It's going to be very varying as far as that goes. So a little off the beaten path for a topic for us, but ultimately I learned a ton.
Yeah, I had.
You're good.
So what I miss? We cover quite a bit of it.
Yeah, I think that's a good summation. You know, I think you got to be creative. You got to be resilient. I like to say prairie is kind of a rebuke. You know, we got rid of too much of it, right? We have to live. We have to have crops. We have to have agriculture, of course. But we did get rid of too much of prairie, and it's not going to be gained back easily. You know, it took thousands of years for these prairies to form, and that's one of the hard things is there's a lot of upfront work in maintaining a good prairie. But when it's there, man, is it worth it?
Yeah. Where can they find your guys' podcast, and what would they expect to find there?
Yep, the Prairie Farm Podcast. You can find it on anywhere you download a podcast, and we talk agriculture, hunting, prairie conservation, really any topic within conservation. We'll talk forestry, we'll talk different wildlife species, and do a lot of natural history topics and things like that.
I think a lot of farmers would think that'd probably get pretty granola crunchy. Type.
Oh, yeah,
but,
yeah.
But if you listened, he said we use hooded sprayers and
Yeah.
like
Oh,
farming,
yeah.
farming techniques and that. It's like it's
Yep.
not all. We haven't said organic or anything like that once during this.
Yeah.
So
Well, we wear shoes all day, and
I like that.
You know, they'd probably be interested in a lot of the equipment because we use old equipment.
Yeah.
We use all crop 72 pole type combines. We use open station swathers, and we use old grain wagons that we convert with drying floors and stuff like that. And so it's kind of fun too that stuff gets to stay alive, not just in 4th of July parades. It gets to do what it was meant to do: pull and spin a PTO and everything else.
Very cool.
Yeah, that's good. Well, it's been a pleasure having you guys on our
Yeah.
podcast, and I'm
Appreciate
glad
you
you made
having
the
us.
trip up here in studio because we couldn't have made fun of Nick anywhere else.
Nicely done. Nicely done.
Right at the end, I had to. But we appreciate you. We appreciate our listeners. So until next time, have a good one.